everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith. Today we welcome a really special guest, Jim Abrams. Jim founded the Charlie Foundation, which is a nonprofit that specializes in ketogenic therapy for epilepsy and other neurological conditions. What makes Jim's story so special is that you may recognize his work as a writer, producer, and director of comedy movies such as Airplane, Naked Gun, Ruthless People, and Hot Shots. He transitioned from that life, however, to begin advocating for ketogenic diet therapies when his young son Charlie was cured of his epilepsy by utilizing a therapeutic ketogenic diet. The diet was undertaken despite resistance from the 5 pediatric neurologists he had seen. When Jim and his wife realized that Charlie was but one of hundreds of thousands of children whose families were either being misinformed or not being informed at all about dietary therapy, they started the Charlie Foundation. This is an inspirational story that I know you'll love. And please check out the Charlie Foundation in our show notes. They have a wonderful online store of ketogenic books and products where your sales will support this wonderful nonprofit. You can go to charliefoundation.org to find out more. Today's episode has been brought to you by Cyto Detox. Cyto Detox is a powerful detox supplement that can help you safely and naturally support your detoxification systems and flush away the toxins you encounter on a daily basis. All CHTV listeners can go to buycytonow.com to discover the science of Cyto Detox and what makes it different from all the other detox products on the market. That's buycytonow.com for more information or to purchase. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Pompa and Jim Abrams to the show. This is Cellular Healing TV.
Welcome, Jim, to Cellular Healing TV. I can't wait for this interview. Well, I have to start here. We were laughing, so I'm already in a laughing mood before the show because I was going back to your writing, producing, and directing days of comedy films. Some of my favorites, like Airplane and Naked Gun, and then Ruthless People, Hot Shots. I mean, you were a Hollywood guy, in which I can't wait to transition people because they're thinking, okay, if they don't know who you are, while I'm interviewing in the health space, you have to understand that, you came from Hollywood, and because I was laughing at some of the Airplane, the lines and the jokes. And I said I literally fell off my chair laughing at one of the scenes. So thank you for that contribution. But I have to say that your greatest contribution on this planet is the Charlie Foundation. And I'm very grateful for that. Really, you have changed so many of my clients and my doctors and all their patients and clients' lives because of it. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. There's actually a line in Airplane when the pilot is talking to the doctor on the airplane, and the doctor says, "Captain, how soon can we land?" And the pilot says, "I can't tell." And the doctor says, "You can tell me, I'm a doctor."
So we also were laughing because we said today it's too politically incorrect.
It's too politically incorrect.
I said, Jim, I don't know that this would fly today. You said definitely wouldn't fly today.
No, I don't think we would get away with half the script today. Plus, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I think it was rated PG-13.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Yeah, I think you're right. I could sit here and just reminisce about those films all day long. But I guess that begs the first question. Okay, I mean, you were a Hollywood writer, producer, and director of some top films. I mean, my gosh, tell the story. I mean, what would transition, from that into running, I would say, the largest, really, as far as when we look at ketosis, keto diets, definitely the original. I think the first, and I think still the most successful, really website information source on ketosis. How did that transition occur?
Well, when our third kid came along, right around his first birthday, he had his first seizure. And up until then, I must say my life was really reflected in the movies. What can we not take seriously? let's just look at media, let's look at the world, and anything that we don't have to take seriously, let's just not take it seriously. Let's have a laugh. And all of a sudden, Charlie had a seizure. And
how old, Jim? How old was Charlie?
He was just before his first birthday.
Wow.
And the first one was sort of subtle, but they escalated in severity and frequency pretty rapidly. And there's nothing funny about epilepsy. I've never heard a good joke about epilepsy.
No.
It doesn't exist. And so that changed things a lot. So we started hunting around for people to, for a solution. And it was at a time in my career when I was doing very well. And so there were a lot of people I worked with who had connections with people, hierarchy at different hospitals. So we got to skip to the head of the line to see many of the best known pediatric neurologists in the United States. So within 5 or 6 months of Charlie starting to have seizures, he had had seizures in the arms of the head of pediatric neurology at UCLA, LA Children's, Boston Children's, Seattle Children's, and several other pediatric neurologists. And the seizures just became more severe, more frequent. He was diagnosed with something called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a very severe form of epilepsy and includes, in the parlance of those days, progressive retardation. And the doctors were all in agreement as to treatment options. There were drugs and there was surgery, and that was it. That was all we ever heard about. And again, this is pre-internet days. So we tried virtually every drug, and none of them worked. And of course, each one has its own special adverse reaction. So all of which hit him, and he started to regress. He couldn't walk anymore. By the time he was, like 6, 8 months into it, he really couldn't get out of a car chair because one of the seizure types he had was a drop seizure. I don't know if you're familiar, but that's sort of like if you pull a lamp out of a cord out of a socket, it just goes out. When you have a drop seizure, all of a sudden you just black out, and so you fall, and you don't break the fall. You don't put out your arms to fall. You just fall. So you fall on your face or wherever. So none of the drugs worked, and he was on as many as 4 or 5 at a time. So finally they said, well, there's a surgery we could try. So we bought in, and they tried a surgery on Charlie's brain, and they said there was a cyst in some lobe back here. They thought maybe they could remove that and that would help. But it didn't. And it was a hideous procedure and set him back further. So we felt we were out of luck. We were told you tried everything, and this kid is just most likely going to wind up in a wheelchair somewhere. And so out of desperation, sort of, his main doctor was at UCLA. So I went to the UCLA library to do some research, not really to try to find a cure, because the best of the best had told us what we should be doing, and we did it.
Right.
But I was trying to figure out how do kids like Charlie and their families make it through life? He's so sick. I mean, did they get to live at home? Do you have to put them in place? I mean, how does that work?
Right.
Such an unusual circumstance. And when you start research, and trust me, I'll remind you, my job at the time was writing fart jokes for 13-year-old boys. So
you have some good ones.
Yeah, but once you start looking at medical text, the ketogenic diet is quite prominent. And you find out quite early that it was developed in the early 1920s at the Mayo Clinic. In every decade, this was 93 when I was at the library, but in every decade from the 20s to the 90s, it was tried at different hospitals by different doctors in different decades. So they weren't like in collusion. These was similar patient populations. They had remarkably similar outcomes. About a third of the kids who went on a ketogenic diet who were sick as Charlie had their seizures go away. Another third were significantly improved, fewer seizures and drugs, and for a third it didn't work. So we went to, Nancy and I went to Charlie's doctor at UCLA, and at the big, and I'll tell this story. At the same time, Nancy had heard, I was reading about the ketogenic diet, Nancy had heard about an herbalist who worked out of a strip mall in Houston, Texas. And he evidently had herbs that were helpful for kids with seizures. So we went to the doctor at UCLA and we said, look, we've heard about these two new things. One is this ketogenic diet thing, and the other is an herbalist out of the strip mall and in Houston. And what should we do? And he said, flip a coin. I don't believe either will work. And so, in fact, we did flip a coin. Huh. Yeah, I know. And we were so desperate. And the strip mall came up first. So we flew with Charlie to Houston and we met this guy. He was a nice guy and gave Charlie some herbs and stuff. And that didn't work. So finally, I called John Freeman, a doctor at Johns Hopkins. And Freeman had published, so mind you, this was 1993. A year before, John Freeman had published one of the many papers I came across that documented the efficacy of the ketogenic diet on 58 consecutive kids who were as sick as Charlie. And he found, and his results were, of these 58 kids in a row, 29% had their seizures go away completely on a ketogenic diet. Yet, mind you, nobody told us about that. So I called Dr. Freeman and he said, send Charlie's records. We did. He said, why don't you bring him here and we'll try the diet. We did. And I've told this story a lot of times. And it's still, so we did try the diet on Charlie, and in 2 days, his seizures were gone. At the time we started the diet, he was on 4 medications and averaging a dozen seizures a day. And he wound up being on the diet for 5 years. Today, he's a 26-year-old school teacher. He boxes, plays piano. He eats whatever he wants. He's never taken another anti-epileptic drug. He's been cured.
Yeah, that's incredible, Jim. And I have to ask you this question. Did you go back to the doctors? You were at the best, right? You said you were at the best of the best, right? You're a big Hollywood producer. It's like, did you go back to them and say, look, this worked?
So yeah, then that's such an interesting question. So the first kind of meeting we had to promote the diet was in 1995. And it was done in conjunction with John Freeman and the folks from Hopkins. And I talked to a few of the doctors at that meeting, and their answer was, and they knew the data. It was in the text that they knew, right? So it was no secret. They said, the reason we couldn't prescribe it is because we didn't know how it worked. We didn't understand the mechanism.
Hold on a second. I would back up and say, but that's almost every drug.
Right?
Yeah, like you don't know what these drugs are doing, right? You think you know what it's doing, but you don't know what it's doing to the rest of the body and the rest of the cells. So why are we drawing the line there?
Exactly. But new to the whole system. Well, and nor did I care why it worked. It worked. You know, he was fine. He was healthy again. He regained all the stuff he had lost. He was happy. He was fun to be with again. His siblings had all that pressure off, and I mean, it just revolutionized our lives. I couldn't have cared less why it worked.
Right. I mean, even this, my question would have been, Doc, if you had this plant that you knew fixed seizures, right? You didn't know how it worked or why it worked, but wouldn't you give it to your son? Right? You know, the answer would be yes, right? It's like, so
right.
Even if you were worried about legal things, the hospital, I mean, wouldn't you tell me off the record, hey man, check into this diet, right? I mean, check into this ketosis diet. We don't know why it works, but it works in 1/3 of the cases. Right. Anyway, we don't want to look back. Look what it did. You know, I mean,
let me interrupt. In a sense, it's worth repeating the story because it's not. It's contemporary today, and now there are tens of thousands of kids who have been on a ketogenic diet who started, a bad seizure. Same story.
Right.
Went on for a couple of years and were cured and went on to live perfectly normal lives. But if you ask the Epilepsy Foundation, is there a cure? They will say no. And then I will say, what do you mean? And they say, well, because we don't understand the mechanisms, and it might be different for one seizure disorder to another, we can't say that there is a cure, which is a egregious step for them to make from my point of view, because when somebody new today gets in touch with the Epilepsy Foundation with the kid who's sick, with seizures and stuff, they will read, there are no cures.
And that just sucks the hope out of you. And what it does is it stops people from looking, right?
Yeah.
Why don't they say there is a cure in at least 1/3 of the people with a certain diet, right? We don't have to claim all cure.
Right.
But gosh, I mean, tell it what it statistically is. I always, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but you look to the power that the drug companies have. And let me tell you something, if there was a drug that cured 5% of seizures, right? The world would know, and they would talk about the miracle cure on every darn news station, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those things, when you look back at the literature, and I have in the 1920s and even beyond seizures, Otto Warburg, when he was doing his research on cancer and ketosis, and then all the drugs started coming out, the anti-seizure drugs, Neurontin, et cetera, and it went by the wayside. And I think only in the last, 5 years, it's been kind of getting more popular, something that I've talked about and known for a long time, and here we are in a different era, where, okay, we are understanding the benefits of ketosis. We are understanding the fact that these ketones have amazing powers of healing the brain and cells and downregulating inflammation. My next seminar, Dominic D'Agostino, young researcher, he's speaking at my seminar in Nashville. The science is there. We know that these ketones heal. We know that I believe humans are meant to go in and out of ketotic states, and one of which is resetting our DNA and healing that occurs, right? It's like today, unfortunately, people don't typically go into ketosis unless they have to. But, talk a little bit about that, and let's kind of move in beyond seizures to some of because you've expanded your foundation for autism, other neurodegenerative, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. So talk about that.
Can I just back up one step? Because I've anguished. I figured when we started the Charlie Foundation in '94 that we'd be in business for about a year. And it's so obvious. I mean, what do you want to do? You want to drug your kid? You want to cut his brain? You want to change what he eats? It just seems so obvious to me. So I've anguished on why, yes, the success we've had has been nice, but not nearly what it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a world epilepsy population today of over 60 million people. And if 0.5% are using a ketogenic diet, that would be optimistic. So I think and you mentioned Big Pharma as an influence, but I think there are other influences too. And some people, I'm a conspiracy guy too, but it's not like these people get together and say, how can we plot against dietary therapies, but there's also the medical device industry, which has a huge impact in the epilepsy world, at least. And I think that's like it's billions and billions of dollars. Yeah. I don't think the medical system teaches diet or diet therapy. The medical schools, I have a friend whose name is Tom Minningham, wonderful guy, and his daughter has epilepsy. And he went through all the same procedures everybody goes through, trying different drugs and whatnot, and finally came across the diet, and that in combination with something else has controlled her seizures. She hasn't had a seizure now in 400 days, something like that. But the interesting thing is that as part of Tom's job, he's a emergency room doctor. And as part of his job, he travels around the United States and lectures other emergency room doctors about emergency room protocol, stuff like that. And so as a result of his experience with Mallory, his daughter, he's added 2 questions to his lectures where he's talking to doctors. And he'll talk to as many as 100 at a time. First question is, how many of you doctors have ever heard of a ketogenic diet? And his guesstimate, and I've been there a couple of times when he did it, his guesstimate is about 3 to 5% have heard of a ketogenic diet. The follow-up question is, how many of you who have heard of the diet know it can be a cure for epilepsy? No one has ever known that. So it's a huge, that's where the real gap is. I mean, it's the people who should be prescribing and using the diet don't even know about it. They don't teach diet therapy and nutrition in medical school.
No, they don't. And, and unfortunately, a big part of my seminar and what I teach is, utilizing the power of ketones and ketosis diets. And yet, I think even though I made the statement that it's been popular in the last 5 years, it still really isn't popular for what we're talking about. It's popular for weight loss. And,
correct.
By the way, I'm staying in a ketosis diet. I don't even think it's great for weight loss. I teach something called diet variation, right? But when you come to utilizing it as this healing tool, it's absolutely phenomenal, what this diet can do. So, before we will move on to some of these other conditions, but, your foundation, first of all, people are going to want to go there. The resources are absolutely amazing. I resource it all the time, and I tell people about it. But what has changed? In other words, what have you seen, with your foundation, and even in the last 5 years? Has there been a reinterest?
Oh, it's a different world.
Yeah.
By the way, the name of the foundation is Charlie Foundation, and our website is charliefoundation.org, and Charlie is spelled with an IE. So I would say 7 years ago, 8 years ago, if you Googled ketogenic diet, the first thing that would come up would be Charlie Foundation. Now it's like page 97 or something.
Yeah, I was expecting something.
It's completely different. And the biggest change, obviously the new applications have had everything in the world to do with that, with cancer and autism and traumatic disorder and all sorts of stuff. So they've had a lot to do with it. And they also, and I mean this only in the best way, but there's also been a way to make it profitable. The problem with the diet was never that it was too difficult. It wasn't profitable.
Right.
Anyway, so I think that's, but now there are new companies. Dom is involved in some. There are a lot of wonderful companies that are coming up with great devices to measure ketones, to increase ketones, and there's so much more science. You know, if you're going to do science, it has to be paid for. And unless there's, you know, so it's easy to find for drug companies to find research money, but it hadn't up until recently been that easy to find money to do ketogenic diet research. But now, as this whole new cottage industry, and maybe it's more than a cottage now, has developed, there's much more research into the new application.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You know, how are the two movies? The one was Lorenzo's Oil, and the other was First Do No Harm. Mm-hmm. Those were both about basically ketosis diet and in seizures. Did they help this? And what year were those? Were those 80s, 90s? I can't remember.
I did First Do No Harm. I don't remember, and that was 97.
Okay.
Lorenzo's Oil, I don't remember what year it was.
Yeah, I don't either. First Do No Harm was you. That was 1997. That was with Meryl Streep, correct?
Right, yeah.
Fantastic. Folks, if you haven't seen it, watch that movie. Mike, where can you find that movie? Can you get it on Netflix?
I think you can just get it on YouTube. You can watch it online or buy used copies on Amazon. And you can get them. We have copies that I think we sell for $10 through the Charlie Foundation. On the Charlie Foundation website, we have a keto store where we sell at a discount a lot of keto supplies, you know, scales, booklet variations of the ketogenic diet, you know, modified ketogenic, low glycemic index treatment, modified Atkins diet. So we have a lot of it's available, and you can, if you want to purchase a copy, First Do No Harm.
It's there. Yeah, I mean, that's good. What else? I mean, while we're talking about your website there, what else can they get? What other resources that interest people?
Well, I think it's a pretty good primer on the state of epilepsy, of keto treatment for medical treatment today. I think that's part of what is happening today with this explosion of interest, and I'm glad to hear that we're very much on the same page about this, with the explosion of interest in the diet for conditioning or weight loss or whatever, which is fine. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Mm-hmm. And if you're on a ketogenic diet for real medical therapy, you can't be as cavalier as it's portrayed in the media today. I mean, if you can't skip a meal, you can't, it's very disciplined and very structured. And if you're on actually a classic ketogenic diet, which Charlie was for many years, you have to weigh and measure the amount of protein, carbohydrate, and fat that goes into every meal. And that has to be calculated with the help of a dietitian. Yeah, because the point is with a condition like Charlie's seizure conditions, the brain has to be constantly being fed from ketones, not glucose. So you have to be very careful. It's not like, if you're doing it for other reasons, moving in and out of it, fine, or having different foods is fine, but not for that. So that's a really good point. And it was actually one of my questions for you. But so, I'm sure First Do No Harm, it was such a good movie. It definitely brought a lot of attention, I'm sure, to this cause, your website, and just even the curiosity. But I'm sure it didn't last either. No, it didn't last, and it had an interesting reaction. I mean, basically what happened is, like all of a sudden, 11 million people saw First Do No Harm in February of 1997. And the neurology community just wasn't ready. I mean, the diet, as we were saying, is very disciplined and has to be, most of the work is done between an experienced dietitian and the patient. Well, there weren't very many dietitians who were available. I think you've talked to Beth Supakania, who is the dietitian who we work was fabulous, but there weren't many Beths around in those days.
Yeah, and by the way, folks, if you haven't seen that, that was an interview I'll have my team post it here. It was an interview that I did with Beth about this. So there's some fundamentals there about the diet that we probably won't cover on this show. Watch that show. We'll put the link here.
Yeah, and there's also on the YouTube page, Charlie Foundation website, there are a lot of interviews with specialists, with doctors and scientists, including Dominic D'Agostino, explaining mechanisms and various questions about the diet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a great, your site it's a fantastic research. I mean, so much.
Here, what I was dropped was the reaction. So the medical community really wasn't prepared to administer the diet, because all of a sudden, imagine all these people sitting at home holding their kids during seizures, and all the people who were friends of people who had seizures, and all of a sudden, phones just started ringing off the hook, and it had this kind of weird reverse reaction, because the doctors couldn't say, we're not available, we don't have a program, we can't do it. There tended to be then an explosion of the myths why you shouldn't do it. It's too difficult. We don't know the science. It can stunt your growth. Things like that, which are not true, but in defense. So First You No Harm had kind of a, I think, mixed. I don't know whether it would have been better as a theatrical movie and leaked its way out. So I don't know. But that was sort of, for a lot of people, it did provide hope. So I'm thrilled that we did it. But I think the medical community was kind of shocked and not prepared.
I'd have to say that movie got my interest in it, and it really perked my interest in why it worked, and I started digging into the literature and that science. So I'm sure it had a positive effect in so many other people's lives besides mine, right? I mean, it was like that kind of got my research going, in that area, to realize, there's something here, and it was always back here. And then I got sick in about 1999, 2000. I immediately reached for that diet. Because I knew there was something not right in my nervous system, et cetera. So that's the first thing that I did that actually worked and started helping me. And of course, cellular detox is, I ended up having mercury poisoning, long story, but I had so much brain inflammation, mercury that was in my brain, which, the combination of being in ketosis and my cellular detox was magic for me, which brings me to autism. So now what are you seeing here? We have an explosion. It's estimated by 2032 that 1 in 2 kids, if the statistics stay the same, could be on the autism spectrum. Ketosis has been magic. I mean, I train doctors all over the country, all over the world, and I can tell you, putting kids in ketosis, that's a big deal. So talk about that.
Well, I will, to the extent I'm knowledgeable. I can tell you that Charlie, my son, does have some autism. He was left with some autism. I'd mentioned he lives independently. He's a teacher. He's too happy. He's doing real well with his life. But we often, in retrospect, think, wow, how lucky were we to put him on the diet when he was 1 year old? I mean, what could this have been if we hadn't done that, for those 5 years? I think the evidence, and again, this is not my area of expertise, I think the evidence is pretty strong that early intervention with diet therapy and early intervention can be very effective with autism.
And you have a lot of those resources now on your site, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The site is, we'll speak better than I can. Yeah, the site addresses the use of diet therapy with autism, with malignant brain tumor. Perhaps, I think malignant brain tumor is the field that has spurred the most amount of recent interest. But certainly there's evidence that it can be effective even as an adjunctive therapy with tumors.
Well, I've interviewed Thomas Seyfried a couple times on this show, and I'm sure you have as well. And utilizing ketosis and fasting to shrink tumors, et cetera, and pretty remarkable science. And again, he's fighting an upstream battle. I have to share this with you. These two over here, we adopted. These two were biological, and they're twins, and we adopted them at age 7. We had a tragedy in their family, but he was on the autism spectrum, sensory integration, Asperger's, and the diet. The first thing we did when we got the children is we're like, oh my gosh, living our life, with this was going to be very difficult. I had just gotten well, and so I immediately said, okay, put him on the diet. So he went into ketosis hardcore. That alone was like dramatic for him. And he speaks about it. I mean, he knows, because there was times where he went off the diet. And even today, he's 22 years old. He recently had gone off as he moved to San Diego, putting myself back in the diet. And he does a modified version, right? Modified version, right? But when he was young, it was solid, hardcore ketosis without any interrupts.
That's the other thing that we didn't mention. The sugar industry and the processed food industries have an enormous influence on our diet. And any of us can take all the sugar out of his diet and we'll be better off for it. You can just kind of say that openly to anyone. And certainly kids who are on the spectrum will benefit also, in kind of dramatically, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it changed his life. The combination of the diet and then my brain detox, the way we do it.
Did you do it with your family? Did the whole family eat keto together? Or?
I mean, fortunately, our whole family ate very well. Dylan was definitely, we had to be way more strict with him. He followed it. I interviewed him actually one time on this show, actually the whole family. And, he remembers the day, I mean, literally, we sat on the bed and he was crying because he didn't want to eat such and such food. Of course, you don't want to look different even in school. And I just said, Dylan, I know you know that you're not right. And he said, yep. How bad do you want it? Do you want to get well? Do you want to be able to completely be well? And he said, yes. I said, you're going to have to trust me. And it was almost because I had a different influence. I was almost glad I wasn't his biological father, because my wife and I had a different influence. We weren't as affected emotionally as you are oftentimes with your own kids. So I have to say it was a little, so I don't know. It's different for everybody, but he really buckled down. It would have been easier, Jim, to your point, if we were all on the same diet, right? But he was disciplined in it. Honestly, he stayed true to it, and I have to say he healed himself, when I think about it.
And now that voluntarily, years later, he would say, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he tells the story, right? And again, I mean, he does detox to this day on and off. He's back on, down the diet. He's an amazing kid. He really is. I always say out of the 5, he ended up to be our easiest.
Right.
I have 5 great kids.
Right.
I think they would all agree with that.
I know that feeling.
Good temper. He doesn't he doesn't get caught up in the emotional garbage that all the other kids do.
Yeah.
So,
I know that feeling.
Yeah. I really need a new picture. I always pull this one up, and it's the same one that's back there. But if you saw him today, you'd be like, oh my gosh, have you met him? I really should bring him on his interview, but he's still a little more shy than my other kids. He's done a lot. He's not necessarily a talker. Well, I have to say that Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, these are other. I mean, if we talk about autism being a massive pandemic, I mean, these are as well. I mean,
yes.
Again, I think that in the medical community, come on, they're not even talked about. I was preparing a PowerPoint this morning, and I pulled a study, and it was ketones in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and it was talking about the results, which are phenomenal. I pulled literally 3 different studies from my archive, so that's more on your site now too.
Yes, and the ultimate question, or one of the questions that I always ask is, and ask people to ask, is why not? It's why not? If there's evidence that's leaning toward a certain outcome that you want, why wouldn't you try it? It's healthy. It's not, the recipes now all over the place that are just delicious. It's not that difficult. the adverse effects are easily manageable if there are any. And if even if the science isn't complete, why not give it a shot?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I was pulled up the study right here. Benefits of elevated ketones, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, ketone bodies, proven potential therapeutic, use for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Yeah. I mean, the science is there.
Right.
I mean, all these studies that I pulled up are published in reputable journals.
Right. That's it.
It's like, yeah, this is not like just my opinion here.
Right. It's based in science, and it is medical therapy. And it's judging from the last 5 years or so, we're very hopeful that it's only going to expand in popularity.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I don't expect you to burst out science right now. Frankly, my viewers probably don't care, but you've been looking at this and studying this, and you're not a doctor, but you're a crusader. But looking at it, why the ketones in the simplest fashion you can say have such a positive effect on the brain for all these different conditions that we noted?
Well, I have a very simplistic, and it's
what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
It is the answer. When we went to Johns Hopkins to put Charlie on the diet, there was a dietitian there. The reason they were still in the ketogenic diet business really is there was a dietitian there whose name was Millicent Kelly, who was just on the verge of retirement, and she had started working with the ketogenic diet in the mid-40s. And by the way, there's an interview with her that was done about a year ago on our website too. If you want to see, it's just this marvelous interview. She talks about the history of the diet and her history with the diet. Yeah, Millicent Kelly. But she explained, and again, this is as far from scientific as possible, but she explained that she likened burning fat to burning a log. And when you burn a log, there's an ash that's left. And that's a scientific, that whatever the ash that is left from burning fat has this positive effect on the brain in many, many ways.
Meaning that when you burn fat, you make ketones.
You make ketones, and ketones.
Yeah. And that's the ash. And whatever that ash is, that ketone, it'll make the brain positive. Right. Yeah, one of the things actually close to that example is another simple example that I give people. It's when you burn glucose, and our cells are meant to do both, right? It can burn glucose for energy or it can burn fat. When you burn glucose, it's like burning wood in a fire. It makes a lot of smoke, right? In a fireplace, you need a chimney. Well, when you burn ketones or fat, it burns so much cleaner that it's like burning natural gas on the stove, especially ketones, right? You don't see the smoke, which means what that means is when you burn sugar in your cell, there's a lot of oxidative waste that the body has to deal with in a cell that's already strained to get rid of it. So that's a problem. So when we put people in a ketosis diet, the fat and the ketones burn so clean that it doesn't make all that oxidative waste, and it gives us a chance to downregulate that, and the body a chance to downregulate that inflammation of the cell.
Well,
so
can I use that?
You can use it.
All right.
Great. Well, okay, I have to end with this. I mean, just such great. First of all, everyone, you should go check out great resources there, dietary resources, recipe things, great interviews, science, you name it. It's on the charliefoundation.org. Go there for sure. You can even, if you haven't watched the movie First Do No Harm, watch it. If you haven't watched Naked Gun or Airplane, watch those too, although those have nothing to do with it.
The triple feature.
Okay, with that, let's end there. So I either want a really funny fart joke or another joke from Airplane or Naked Gun. I'm putting you on the spot, man. We started funny, we got to end funny.
Okay. I'm trying to think of one.
He's going for his break. Okay, that one's too crude. That one's okay. That one's
yeah. That's right. I know. That's exactly what's going on. I'm trying to get the R stuff Well, okay, so one of my favorites is when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played the co-pilot of the airplane in Airplane, and a little boy goes up into the cockpit and calls him out. And he said, "Wait a minute, you're not the co-pilot. You're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar." And he denied it. No. And then the kid calls him out and says, "My dad always said you didn't play hard enough on defense, and you only work during the playoffs and stuff." And it's always fun when you watch that.
Well, I tell you, I have so many favorite pieces of that movie because that was one of those movies that made me belly laugh, right? I mean, literally, belly laugh. And and it was all things that today would be probably too politically incorrect, but
I know.
It makes me laugh. You can make fun of Italian Americans and I'll laugh every time because stereotypes are funny, man. And a lot of it's true, but it's funny.
Right. Yeah. And if it's done, I mean, it's not mean-spirited. It's just fun.
It's just funny. It's just good stuff, man. Well, listen, you've had such a great contribution to society. You really have. I mean, those movies alone, the fact that you made me belly laugh years ago, that's healing, man. And you're healing people on this level, from pain to purpose. We're both here today because of the traumas, the adversity that we had in our life, but look what it's done, right? So here we are serving at another level, and you've done that. You could have sat on the information, but you took the skills God gave you and you've made movies and you've developed this amazing resource for so many people. So support his website, no doubt, folks. And is there another way that they can support you anyway on it, Jim?
Well, there's a donate thing. And what I always encourage people to do is if they have had some sort of success with the ketogenic diet for anything, for any, medical disorder, get in touch with the local media. I mean, that's the way you're not going to, the people who fund the med schools aren't going to start all of a sudden promoting diet therapy. So it's up to us, the people who've benefited from diet therapy, to promote it, to go public, to tell our stories. And the word that slipped by that you used earlier, that is the most important, or as important as any, is to give others hope.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing, the darkest hour, and I remember very clearly, is when you lose hope.
You know what? I remember that too, even in my own battle, because I didn't know what was going on, and I was trying to track things down. And if I thought I had something and I read somewhere that, there's no cure, it was devastating to me. Thank God I didn't believe it. So thank you for bringing to light.
Thank you. Thank you for doing what you've done. Yeah, this is fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, pleasure. I mean, thank you for being on Cellular Healing TV, because we owe you a lot of respect. So appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. This episode was brought to you by Cyto Detox. Please check it out at buycytonow.com. We'll be back next week and every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We truly appreciate your support. You can always find us at cellularhealing.tv, and please remember to spread the love by liking, subscribing, giving an iTunes review, and sharing the show with anyone you think may benefit from the information heard here. And as always, thanks for listening.